It is really good because the process gets refined and gets better. I know where some of the blind spots for myself are after a few years. I know this is the week when the Tabik had a 3-cone of. I do appreciate that because at the end, it's what can this player do for the team? And I think that's where this building really shines during this time of year is the scouts. And when, okay, yeah, I thought for me, I absolutely love this time of year. All the work and prep, you get to add players to the team. And it's always such an interesting process because you watch them on tape and then there's some combine meetings, some school visits, some guys who take visits back to here. And at the end, you get to see. At the end, you get to see, who would potentially be the best fit for your team. You always like a hell of a lot of players, and you want to add a whole bunch. So that's part of the fun part of the puzzle, going together from free agency and then into the draft process. And that puzzle really takes all the way in through the season as we're getting going. But as Thomas said earlier, 5 years in, it is really good because the process gets refined and gets better. I know where some of the blind spots for myself are after a few years. I know this is the week when the crazy stories come out. And so I always remember to keep the main thing. And that's the guy who can play, not that Tabik had a 3-cone of 7.24 and Led had one at 7.23. So Led is clearly the better prospect. But
So we're just doing a live stream of the press conference that is going on right at this very moment. It is cutting in and out. I apologize for that. We'll try to make sure that this is coming through. The Periscope seems to not be working very well, but we will try our best to be able to get that up for you, just some of the things that they're talking about at this very point in time.
Yourself falling prey to stuff that in the big picture doesn't really matter?
Yeah, I think I did earlier, Jeff, where you get so concerned about everything. And so I guess an example would be like the average of a mock draft percentage, like this guy's at 13% of the people would think he would go here. And if I could tell you some of the mock drafts that I've seen take place without any film or evaluation to go on, you'd be pretty surprised. So I always, it's a good reminder after some experience, I'd say, that, a friend of ours had said, keep making the cake, keep the main thing. And that always comes back to the players and all the evaluations that the scouts put on to the guys. And in a lot of cases have looked at players through their junior year or senior year, or for the guys coming out early, their sophomore year and their junior year. So they've been through multiple years on a player and see the growth and the development. So, it's a good reminder to always go back to that.
Also, you're more involved in the draft here, obviously, than when you were an assistant coach. So have you been more privy or more concerned about shutting out the obvious disinformation campaigns, which we talk about often, that take place every year this time of year?
Yes, and I think that also came with experience, to say that that's why I kind of alluded to this week, or maybe even into last week, lots of things filter out and get going. So I'm more cognizant, I would say, of that, around our 31 other counterparts of what's real and what's just, some scuttlebutt on some things. So it's definitely an interesting experience knowing that. I'm sure you guys do some of that in the reporting side too, to know, is this real or just, we're going to throw it against the wall and see what sticks.
You guys started by talking about the guys in the trenches. Thomas, I'm curious, as you look at the offensive linemen, how many do you feel are like first round material as you look through the list of guys? And Dan, you talked about guys getting ready to come in and contribute immediately.
Yep.
I wonder how far deep down that goes as far as guys that can come in and actually start as far as the offensive line.
Right.
Well, to the numbers, I think this is it's a big year, and I think it's not only a big year for the numbers of tackles like other years. This year, guards are going to be falling into the first round, I believe. So I think there could be a run on of 7 to 10 potentially. So it's good. Again, not only tackles but also potential guards.
For me, I think one of the questions, Vaughn, is that'd be a better question for somebody maybe who was not even involved specifically with the team, because a guy may really fit one style better than another. And so at this stage, like, the only people that you're going to select are the ones that are going to fit for your team. And so that's a little different. And so you have to know, okay, for our team, it may be one number. For the league, it may be another. But at the end of the day, we're scouting for the Falcons. And so that's a little different than what could be around the league. And I think that's probably a good perspective for the fan to know that, like, okay, our team may only think it's 3 or 4 or 8 or 10, but in actuality, maybe 12 got selected. So it's not to say that that team, us included, was wrong. It just meant that these particular guys were the best fit. So that's what's fun. Like, you start the initial grades, and then as you start, like Thomas last night, in his office, of really digging down to the final pieces of that puzzle we were talking about, and why certain guys are a fun fit on the team. And I like that part, because I'm able to articulate to him what that player would do on the team and how quickly we could expect him to move into a role. And sometimes it has a little bit to do with the background that they came from. I think if you remember last year, we thought Calvin would be able to get up to speed more quickly than some because of his background at Alabama, and at that time between Sark and Dayball and Nick and the system that they had run, he was going to be able to get up to speed quicker than most in this system, because there would have been some carryover compared to a player maybe who had come from a different system where it was you've kind of heard of like code words or digits, or their offense was based on code words where it was all no huddle and a word meant something, and then they get to here, and you should expect it to take a little longer. Like, that would be a bigger jump. What we can often say to one another is, okay, this is how we would try to feature him early, and maybe, sometime during year one he can get there, or sometimes it may take longer, if there's some development that has to take place. So that's why, like, it takes a lot of time to go through these guys, and he and the scouts have really, hundreds and hundreds of players that you kind of keep whittling down.
I assume it's safe to say you're hoping that a lot of quarterbacks go before you go at 14. And as it pertains to that, if they do, with more available players, how does that change your strategy as far as possibly moving up because a player is there later than what you thought, or because the draft is so deep, can you afford to wait and stay at 14?
I think 14 is a really good place to be. I think, of course, it gives you opportunities up and down. I mean, last year we were dabbling in discussions with people right in the middle of the round. It's kind of a right place for discussion. You're giving away a lot to move up into the 10s, into top 10 for sure. With the quarterbacks potentially going, yes, of course it helps. And we continue to look at players, not only the quarterbacks that might go somewhere else, but other positions that we may not be focused on that we think will go earlier than we had planned. That's going to be a good thing for us. We're always doing that. We're always looking on the board as we start to put together our numbers and sort of ruminate on what's going to be there.
What they think
and we start taking some of these guys that we actually put away on another part of the board and hope that they go as well. And there's usually about 3 or 4 of those guys that go like that we didn't expect to go as high. Every year it's that way. So it's just it's interesting to see how it all comes together, of course.
And to follow up on Jeff's question earlier, I'd have to say this is one of the finest quarterback classes I've seen since 1983, probably, in that space. So really, something to behold.
Smoke.
And I think we'll get going there. So touche. There you go. Thank you for helping me support that.
You're thinking the top 13 should all pick quarterback, right?
I can see how one would.
Yeah.
When you guys are weighing all of your needs and for that pick early, how do you weigh picking the best player available, at those needs versus your overall top need?
Yeah. Well, I mean, we've talked about this many years, and I don't want to be a broken record. I mean, of course, we're needs-based, and that said, we're not just going to go after someone because we need that position. We need to make sure that talent is matching, what is on the board. So usually, again, you may have 2, 3, 4, or 5 needs, and if there's your number one need, the talent is significantly lower, then you're going to look to the other point of need and see where that player is on the board, and that's the one that, ultimately you're hoping to pick. But I guess my point on it is we'll never just randomly pick someone because we need a D end or a defensive whatever position. That's not going to be the way it is. We've spent a lot of time as an organization. It's a very collaborative group, with the coaches and the scouts, and we've run all kinds of comparatives, and we have a really good feel of, who's going to be a good fit for our team and who's going to hopefully contribute early.
What impact does injury? You guys have massive amounts of injury. What impact does injury have on how you change leads going into the draft?
Well, I'll comment on it first and toss it over to Dan. I mean, no one wanted to talk about it a whole bunch last year, but we had some concerns that way, of course. We hope that those guys all heal completely, and there's no question it's in the back of our mind. We would be short-sighted if we weren't thinking that way. That said, we have a really good feeling of where we are with our depth. That's our job to know where we are. And
they added a bunch
yours as much, but it is ours, and we have an idea of where we are and where we need to continue to build. Hopefully, those guys that have come back from injuries are going to be well, and they are in a good place right now. So, Dan,
I think two-part question. The first one. We're in constant contact with the guys who are in rehab and where are they and how's that going in terms of their injury. And then the second part of it, it's not just the injuries here. Sometimes, the players in the draft, and their medical grade and what injuries they could have, and would there be any managing of an injury due to that. So I think it's two-part, one for the current group and then one for the guys who are, part of this selection process. And as long as you feel comfortable knowing when that you expect them back to full health or full speed, it gives you a better perspective for it.
Can I follow up with this question real quick and just ask you, do you look at running backs any differently? Do you look at safeties any differently because of the injuries that were sustained at those positions?
Guys that they
And
might be looking at because they
longer-term injuries, and Devontae's been a little bit banged up throughout his career.
might be looking at some guys that have some injury history.
I was thinking about, going on and on about it, but no, you hit the nail on the head. Of course you do.
You guys have spent majority of the free agency bolstering the offensive and defensive lines. When you look at the roster of cornerbacks, the position it looks like is a little thin right now. Is that a position of need for you guys that now that you're done the pre-draft visits, that you like this class, and how much of a need is that for you guys?
Yeah, for sure. Now we get to talk to the defensive coordinator. So, yes, there is some good corners in this draft, and it is definitely something that we always kind of keep your eye on. So there's certain spots based on the amount of passing that the league is in. It's over 60%. So rushers and corners, Kels, are always at the front of your thinking, and you better keep thinking that way because you've seen some of the speed of the receivers, you've seen some of the size of the receivers, and what you oftentimes think about is who would match up and guard different styles of players. When you're playing a zone defense, you're not obviously playing man-to-man where the same things happen. You're not, in the guy's face. When you're playing man-to-man, you're following this guy all over the field. And so even as you're going through the draft, you try to look at who would excel in certain things. It'd be awesome if everybody was ideal in everything, but you try to feature the players in the best ways. And there are some good corners in this draft as well. And that's not just to feed off Jeff earlier. That's not any lip service.
What about the local kid, Rock, y'all seeing who's a wrestler, Presbyterian, just a great story coming into this?
You don't hear a lot of corners who were state champions wrestling. And such an unusual background. You've heard some, certainly through the year, he was a state champion, sprinter. He was, point guard. But to hear that kind of toughness and the, physicality that he has, and meeting him, what an impressive guy, and what he's done in a short time. To say that Temple knew what they were taking on a year ago, I would say, we knew all along.
I don't
not
think
so
was
fast,
on the list.
But I would say, what a good opportunity for him to take advantage of that and to say, hey, I'm going to really go for it and apply it. And so he kind of just kept getting better and better as it went. So definitely a prospect who's showing on tape that he's going to be able to handle some good jobs in the NFL.
I think that group, by the way, it's not a really fast group, generally speaking. Of course, there are some fast players, and there's a really fast group of receivers this year. So Dan and I have spent a lot of time talking about that. How is that going to play out? That said, there are some really good corners just because their times might have been in the 4.5s doesn't mean that they're not going to be effective in this league.
Don't talk about wide receivers, man.
As far as your board in the later rounds and even the undrafted free agents.
Thomas,
with
there's
the
a lot of
AAF
really fast
players
wide
that were available
receivers.
there, how much did that change? And
You chill
is
out
it more
right
beneficial
now.
to get an AAF guy who you've got tape on and film on that's recent as opposed to an undrafted kid that, you know, would one be more likely to make the roster than another?
No, that's a good question. I mean, we scanned those rosters, you know, well, and you know, we were picking up people and doing certain things in free agency that we thought were important. Our focus, no question, is on the young guys and developing the young guys who are, you know, Dan's great with that. We're really good about playing our young guys here. So, not saying we weren't looking at the other league, but our focus is definitely on the youth and developing young guys and
Right. Don't worry
hopefully
about outside
developing
sources.
you know, how
You know.
we like them to play,
Yeah.
develop the good habits here versus
Same stuff.
some of those guys, as you know, were in a situation where they were trying to get their second and third and fourth chance.
I
Y'all
think
can
it's
hear
good
this
that
right?
if you had a
You can
grade
hear it
coming out
okay?
of them in college, and so that was certainly the case with Chris. And then, okay, there might be a chance to keep going, and then you get a chance to see, are they progressing and are they developing? So it definitely is going to help some guys this year that they had more chances to go and play and get on tape, because sometimes you get in that space where you hadn't really played other than a preseason game in a couple of years. And so I know for us, yeah, we were thankful to see some guys play, and I think it definitely helped.
Coach, what excites you about Tyler Davison and bringing him in here, and what
Oh,
kind of
this should
role
be
do you
good.
envision him having
Right.
on
Tell
this
me.
team?
So inside, you know, when you go against somebody in the division, you have a little better feel for what they can and can't do. You just have more exposures to them.
Right.
And we were really impressed through free agency about his ability to play the run. He's got really long arms for
Right.
a guy who's, you know, not really tall, so he could get in, he can disengage. And I just felt he played with the toughness. He was really strong and sturdy inside. And so we thought if we could add him into that mix of guys, it would be really impactful for us. So it was a good addition. And, you know, we're glad to have him on board.
Did free agency shake out the way you had hoped in terms of the guys that you set out to acquire that you were actually able to find?
Yes, I mean, we were really excited about that. Again, we had a really we really honed in on where we were looking, and we were, you know, again, very mindful.
Common answer.
D-Led wrote it in his recent piece there about free agency and such. We were really mindful of where we were money-wise. We've talked about that, not to beat it up, and we continue to pull money from places that you probably think we're not pulling them from or shouldn't be able to pull it from. But I think we've been really good. Again, I think we've been mindful about the
What does
players
that
we're
mean?
bringing in. They fit our system.
Where are you pulling money from?
And then we've had some really good fortune to have guys like, you know, AC come back and sign with us, and getting Tyler in here. I mean, I just feel like
Let's talk about
we
that.
go into the draft with, you know, in a really good place, and we don't feel the same amount of pressure going into the draft having to get, you know, all these depth areas taken care of. And that's a good feeling going in as co-team builders, knowing that the pressure's not there to pop 3 D linemen and this guy and that guy and offensive linemen. So I think with all the work that we did in free agency, again, our pro department did a heck of a job teeing us up to make the final decision on who we were bringing in.
Following up on that for both of y'all, does it feel any different, though, going into a draft coming off of a more difficult season? I mean, the last 2 years, it was almost like everybody sort of felt like y'all were trying to plug in, get maybe 1 or 2 things to get over the hump to a championship. Now, coming off a non-playoff year, does this draft feel any different, or isn't any more pressure on it to kind of?
For me, there's not more. It's always about, you know, like I'd referred to earlier, putting that puzzle together. And so we were as specific as we could be through the free agency to find what we felt were the best fits for us, style,
I'm gonna say something to
identity,
this.
the physicality that we were looking for. So it was pretty specific goal in mind from the free agency side. And when we were able to, you know, acquire some of the guys that we did, it sets into here. But it's always the same excitement and enthusiasm as it goes through the draft, because that's still the lifeblood of it, and it's where you're going to build so much of your team and your roster. But no different than any other time. I guess for me, just, you know, 5 years in, I have a better appreciation for the process than I ever have.
I've been on both sides of that, of course, the tough ones and the good ones. I think it's always exciting to know that you're adding those new players and getting more. You know, our coaching staff is very involved along with our scouting staff, and it's, again, I can't, you know, describe it any better than saying that it's such a good working environment. these guys, our coaches are going out working players out. Sometimes the scouts are with them. Sometimes we come back and we rehash all the individual workouts we've been doing. So it's just a really good bonding time for the organization and football ops, because we all have our hands in it. Again, very collaborative. This is not an organization where you have one guy pounding their fist on the table, signing someone or drafting someone. We take all of that into consideration, and we talk to everyone about it. And in the end, Dan and I look at it, and again, we have a really good scouting staff who provide us not only with evaluation ability for us, but also provide a really important part, which is the research elements of scouting. They're able to talk with the coaches on it. So it all comes together really well. My point is, we get really excited every year for building this team and how we all function together.
I think you've discussed this before, but if it comes down to you want somebody and does one guy have the say, or do y'all, like, if both guys don't agree on it, do you move on?
We never disagree on the final pick, right?
No, yeah. If we disagree, then it's probably not the right fit. So we'd go back, hey, let's go look at the tape again, and then either we see it the same way or not. So if it comes to that spot, yeah, we don't do that. Yeah.
It's really interesting, honestly, where we are on, in line. And then when we have our discussions about players, it could be something as minor as, does this guy have change of direction? And Dan and I may be in a spot where we're discussing that, and we rail through that much more video to make sure we come to an agreement on what that attribute is that needs to change. Rarely, it's really interesting, rarely do we get to a spot where one guy's up here on a player on the board, and another guy's down here, and there's a disagreement on him. And I know that sounds sort of like, well, that's quite ideal, but it is a case. It is a case.
After doing all of this work for this year's draft, what do you believe is maybe the most unique thing about this draft?
Also, change of direction is very interesting verbiage there.
Well, again, I think this is a class where both the interior guys on the offensive and defensive line, it's a strong group that people are going to be drafted in the first round that might not have been. I really do believe in today's world, things have changed. So I would say this younger group of general managers and head coaches are throwing aside some of the long-standing approaches where you wouldn't draft A, B, and C in the draft in the first round. People, head coaches and general managers, are now going after the player that's going to affect their organization right now. It doesn't matter if he's a guard, it doesn't matter if he's a receiver, or whatever it is. It's a big thing that in any of our discussion with our contemporaries, you feel it now a lot more than old standing philosophy of you don't go after a certain player. I like that because I think it's a lot more free flowing, and I think ultimately, you have to build your football team.
Thomas, based on that.
Good, Vaughn.
You guys just talked about the strength of the interior guys. I wanted to ask you guys if Rashid Hageman is a guy that you guys might think could help maybe address a draft need. If that's somebody you're thinking about bringing back.
Yeah, we definitely had Sheed in and did a good job, good workout. And like all the guys, if we have anything to update from a free agency side or who to sign, we'll keep you up to date. But he came in, he did a good job in the workout.
So no.
Thomas, based on what you just said on the previous question, when you assess this class and place grades on the first-round grades, is there more this year? Is there legitimately 32 first-round grades in this class, or does it drop off, and does that change your thinking with 9 picks at all?
Of course it drops off. I mean, what I've seen many, many years is even the top 5 picks have challenges, right? They're not all perfect. And as you go through the draft and you go, move towards 32, you're having considerations on players that ideally you would like in the second and third round. That's the way it is. We are always discussing that. When we start talking about it, we'll say, look, love to get this kid in the third round. You're going to have to get him at 45, or you're going to have to move up. Maybe he's not a 14 pick, but you have to move back to 20, but you'll never get him at 45, or this player you'll never get at 79. There are always discussions among myself and Dan for sure, as well as our directors on where we are and
Zach
trying
Allen
to project where these players are going to go. That's a big mystery. It's the fun part of it, quite honestly. It's one of the reasons that it can be complicated moving back. You have to know that you have 3, 4, or 5 players in your so-called quiver to pick if you lose out on the guy that you're thinking you might want.
Would you say you have more or less players with first-round grades in this class
than
previous years?
Than other years? No, I wouldn't say. I wouldn't say that.
How do y'all see the safety class? A lot of people say this is the best safety class in a while, starting with the Abrams kid. Abram started at Georgia, Mississippi State. But y'all got 5 safeties now to sign another 2. But just
That was
how
a
y'all
shameless
see the
Zach
safety
Allen
class,
plug.
and are they hybrids?
You'd like a
can
guy
go
that
both,
could be the
in
45.
I think it's an
but
important
you
position,
might have to
but
take
it's
him at
really
14 or
evolved
move back
more
again.
because teams are often using a third safety more than we have traditionally. We play nickel defense. I've told you that almost 70% of the time. But sometimes against a team that has 2 tight ends and you want to guard a bigger tight end, maybe the nickel's not the ideal size person to do that. And so quite often people are using a third safety more than we have. So this person who's kind of almost – there's 2 different types of safeties, for teams that are one in the post and one down. There's one that can have the size to play in the box and guard tight ends, and then oftentimes there's somebody else who can play on backs and receivers. So the position itself – if you were coming up through, I just feel like there's more of them now because they're even playing that way more in college. The bigger nickel is
so they're
more,
not killing safety as
it might be
a
called a nickel
potential
in college,
option
but we're
that they
looking
might
at it
have
as a
to
safety.
might
Does that make
actually
sense to
go
you guys? So
after.
it's like how whatever they're calling them in college might be different than what we would call them. So more opportunities for the third, call it defensive back, could be a third corner or third safety, more opportunities for the third wide receiver. And I think those 2 are kind of going hand in hand with the addition of the receivers.
Coach, after the moves you made in free agency on the offensive line, how much more comfortable are you with that position, maybe more so at the end of the season?
I would say we're gaining traction on where we'd like to be and the identity we'd like to have, but by no means are we finished in the development of that position. I think it's always one
Right after.
that you're constantly trying to
Right
turn
after,
into, and so
Right after this is done.
because of the nature of having 5 guys, so it's the biggest position generally on your team in terms of depth. And finding the big humans around the earth that can really move and get after it, that's hard. So the supply and demand is there. So it's nice to know that in this class there's some guys that are, over a couple years maybe the numbers weren't quite as high. I don't know what it'll show at the end, but I would bet it would show there's more that play in this class than maybe a couple others.
A couple more guys. Thomas, any update on Grady's contract and Julio's extension?
On Grady, nothing new. Julio, we're in conversations, and they seem to be moving along well. No timeline for it. Yeah.
Just say, the last 4 drafts, the exception of Calvin Ridley, the first 2 picks in each draft, they've been defensive players. So 7 out of the last 8, you had your first 2 picks. What does it say about the organization? And now looking back on it, how did all of that come to fruition? Does that say that you guys are, because you're a defensive coach, that's what you like? That is how you like the identity of the Falcons? What you like the identity for the Falcons primarily be?
Well, we couldn't play Cal corner. We were going to try to, but we didn't. No, I think as you're going through it, you're just trying to find the best fits for the team, and that's what it always comes back to is the team. How do we constantly push the team to see how we can improve? And if it works that player that you're going to select in that window can help the team the best at that moment, you let it rip. And so during all of those years, it could have just as easily been an offensive player. Based on where we were picking and who was, for us the best way to help the team at that time. So we'll have to see
Gotta
this
be
year.
Zach Allen or Christian Wilkins, right? Talking about Evan Thompson.
Nothing else?
Chat.
All right. Thank you, guys. Good to see everybody.
And that is the end of the press conference, and we're going to go ahead and mute that. So one moment, please, while I change up a few things here. Get this out of the way. Up. Do it like that. All right. Let's see. And I'm just going to. All right. That's better. So here's what I got from that. Here's what I got from that press conference. Or do you guys want to go ahead and hit Discord up and then we go do the Zach Allen tape? What do you guys want to do? Discord? All right. All right. Discord link, I believe, is in the description of this video. Hit up the Discord if you want to come talk with us. We're going to talk a little bit about that. And then I'm going to do a Zach Allen film breakdown and a Jerry Tillery film breakdown on Twitch. You guys can join us. The link is in the description of this video. And we'll go and watch Zach Allen and Jerry Tillery. But first, Discord. I'll see you guys over there. Peace, hair grease. Later, y'all.